The war room fell silent as another star system disappeared from the holographic display commander. Vexthor of the Sorix stood before the tactical screen, his reptilian eyes tracking the red markers that represented the Devourer fleet advancing through Confederation space like a plague spreading across healthy species had united under the Confederation banner, pooling their knowledge and resources to stand against the machines that consumed everything in their path. It was not enough the Devourers were relentless, tireless, and seemingly infinite in number. They did not negotiate, did not stop, did not show mercy. They arrived in a system, stripped every planet down to bedrock for raw materials, converted it all into more of themselves, and moved on to the next target. 67 worlds had fallen in the past standard year alone. We need options, Chancellor Miravel said, her crystalline form refracting the dim light of the war room into fractured rainbows. Across the assembled leaders, we need a miracle, muttered General Cross of the Deepborn, his aquatic suit bubbling softly. Vexor had been searching the ancient archives for 3 rotations without sleep. Desperate for anything that might give them an advantage, the Confederation had superior tactics, better trained crews, more advanced shielding technology. None of it mattered when the enemy could afford to lose 10 ships for every one of yours and still come out ahead. The historical database contained records stretching back over 50,000 years, compiled by the predecessors before their mysterious disappearance. Most of it was tactical analysis, fleet compositions, technological specifications, but there were other things buried in those files, myths, legends, stories that sounded too strange to be real. Vexthor had dismissed them at first, but desperation makes scholars of warriors and believers of skeptics. He isolated one particular set of references that appeared across multiple predecessor databases, the Terranzac, according to the fragmentary records. They had been allies of the predecessors during an ancient war against something the translation matrices called the consuming dark. The descriptions were vivid, almost poetic in their intensity. Bipedal mammals from a world designated Terra, or Earth. Class M planet in a region of space, now marked as the Forbidden Reaches. They were described as relentless fighters who excelled at close-quarters combat, boarding actions, and what the predecessors termed acceptable loss tactics. One report stated that a single Terran destroyer crew, boarded by enemy forces and with their ship vented to space, continued fighting for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. Another claimed that Terran ground forces once held a fortified position against odds of 50 to 1 for 3 planetary rotations, sustaining 90% casualties before the enemy finally retreated. The records painted them as warriors beyond anything the current galaxy had ever produced, but then, abruptly, all references ceased. Last entry in the predecessor logs mentioned something called the Fracture, followed by a note that Terra had gone dark and was to be considered lost. That was 48,000 years ago. Vexthor brought his findings to the War Council with little hope they would be taken seriously. You want us to chase ghost stories? Admiral Dexron of the Chitrix clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. I want us to explore every possibility, Vexthor replied, keeping his voice steady despite the exhaustion pulling at his bones. The predecessors did not traffic in fiction, and these records are consistent across multiple independent databases. High Chancellor Miravel studied the data with her multi-spectrum vision, analyzing layers of information invisible to most species. The coordinates for this Earth are listed as being in the galactic fringe, a region we have never explored because the predecessor warnings designated it as hazardous space. Everything is hazardous now, Vexthor said. At least this hazard might offer hope instead of just a slower death. The council debated for hours before reaching a decision. They could not spare ships for wild searches through uncharted space, not with the Devourers consuming 3 systems per rotation cycle, but they authorized Vexthor to send long-range probes to the coordinates listed for Terra. It was a token gesture, something to keep him occupied while the real leaders planned their final defensive stand. The probes were launched, and Vexthor returned to his duties, preparing the Bastion Nebula for what would likely be the Confederation's last battle. The nebula was a natural fortress, dense with ionized gas that played havoc with sensors and targeting systems. If they could draw the Devourers into that maze and use their superior maneuvering to offset the enemy's numerical advantage, they might buy enough time to evacuate the core worlds. Might probably not, but might 3 rotations later. As Vexter was reviewing fallback positions with his tactical staff, an alert chimed on his personal console. One of the probes had detected something not at the original Terra coordinates, which showed only a system of barren rocks orbiting a dying star. But at the edge of the search, Grid A structure, massive, ancient, clearly artificial, it was broadcasting a signal on predecessor frequencies. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear enough. Guardian Station Alpha 7 operational threat. Assessment critical initiating recall protocol. Vexter felt his blood run cold, whatever the Guardian Station was recalling. It had been waiting out there in the dark for almost 50,000 years. He reported his findings to the Council. Immediately, High Chancellor Miravel convened an emergency session. To review the data, this could be a trap. Admiral Vexron warned the Devourers have shown tactical cunning before, and luring our forces away from the Bastion would be a logical strategy. Or it could be exactly what we need. Vexter countered, the predecessors built that station for a reason, and they built it too. Last, the debate was cut short by a priority alert. Devourer fleet had been detected entering the outer marker zone. They would reach the Bastion Nebula in 36 hours. Available ship was recalled to defensive positions. The time for exploration and ancient mysteries had passed. Now came the time for survival, or more likely, a final stand that would be remembered by no one, because there would be no one left to remember. Vexter took his place aboard the flagship Eternal Vigilance and prepared for the end. He thought about the Terrans, those legendary warriors from the old stories, and wondered if they had faced their own extinction with the same grim determination. Had they fought to the last? Or had they simply faded away when their sun died? It did not matter. No myths and legends could not save them. Only weapons and courage could do that. And Vexter suspected they would not be enough as the Confederation fleet formed up in the swirling gases of the Bastion Nebula. As the Devourers advanced, like an inevitable tide of metal and malice, a different kind of alert began to sound. Ships unidentified, emerging from uncharted Space 30 contacts. Moving in perfect formation, Vexter pulled up the sensor data and felt his secondary heart skip a beat. The configuration was wrong. Alien, in a way that even the wildly diverse Confederation ships were not tanned. When the lead vessel finally responded to hailing frequencies, the voice that came through spoke in a language the translation Matrix had not heard in 48,000 years. "This is the Terran Expeditionary Force," the voice said. Crisp and clear and utterly impossibly real. "We received your distress call in the command center of the Eternal Vigilance." 12 species stood frozen in shock as legends came home from the dark. The human fleet held position at the edge of Confederation space, their ships dark and patient against the starfield. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical displays. As the alien vessels slowly approached with weapons powered down in a gesture of peaceful intent, they looked terrified. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, observed they should be. Chen replied without malice, "We just appeared out of nowhere claiming to be something they thought was a fairy tale." The first face-to-face meeting took place aboard the Eternal Vigilance in a hastily prepared conference room. Commander Vexter felt his evolutionary instincts screaming warnings as the human delegation entered the chamber. They were predators. Everything about them confirmed it. Forward-facing eyes designed for tracking prey, exposed teeth that could rip and tear, bipedal stance that freed their upper limbs for tool use, and violence. Average height, neither impressively large nor dismissively small. Endurance builds, suggesting persistence rather than burst speed, but it was the way they moved that truly unsettled him. Confident, relaxed, like apex predators walking through territory they owned. Admiral Chen stepped forward and performed what the briefing packet had described as a handshake, a gesture of greeting that involved clasping appendages. Her grip was firm but not aggressive. "Thank you for seeing us," she said as the translation matrix rendered. her words into Confederation. Standard, your distress beacon was received by our automated Guardian network, and we came as quickly as we could. High Chancellor Miraval studied the human with all her sensory spectrums active. You claim to be Terran, the species mentioned in predecessor records. But those records state your civilization fell nearly 50,000 years ago. Chen nodded slowly. We did fall, but not the way you think, and not for the reasons your records probably suggest. She gestured, and one of her officers activated a holographic display images. Appeared showing a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star Earth. Our homeworld went through what we call the Fracture Wars approximately 49,000 years ago. The images shifted, showing cities burning and ships destroying each other in orbital space. We had spread across hundreds of systems, built an empire that touched 3 spiral arms, developed technology that let us reshape worlds. Vexter watched the images with growing fascination. What happened? We fought ourselves, Chen said simply. Ideological differences that started as political debate turned into factional conflicts, and those turned into total war. The hologram showed Earth itself burning. We nearly destroyed everything, and when the shooting finally stopped, when the survivors looked at what we had done to ourselves, we made a choice. She paused, and Vexler saw something painful flash across her face. We went dark and we retreated to our home system and a few nearby colonies. We deactivated our automated stations, powered down our beacon networks, and told the galaxy we were gone. Why? Miravel asked. Chen's expression hardened. Because we needed to learn how to be human again, and not just really good at killing each other. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. For 48,000 years, we rebuilt our civilization from the ground up, Chen continued. We kept the technology, but we changed the philosophy, and we created safeguards to prevent another fracture. She looked around the room, meeting each alien's eyes in turn. We also created the Guardian network, automated stations positioned at the edges of known space, programmed to watch for existential threats and wake us up if the galaxy needed us. Admiral Vexron clicked his mandibles. Skeptically, you expect us to believe that 30 ships can make a difference against the Devourers when our entire combined fleet barely slows them down. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Commander Vexler, you have been studying the old records about humans, yes? Vexler straightened in surprise. How did you know? Because you are the one who activated the deep space probes that found Guardian Station Alpha 7, and you are the one who has been searching predecessor databases for references to Terra. She pulled up one of the ancient files, the one describing the Terran destroyer crew that fought for 6 hours in hard vacuum. This report is accurate. Chen said quietly. The ship was the Defiant. The captain was Lu Chen, my direct ancestor 40 generations back. She highlighted another record. The ground forces holding impossible odds, also accurate, and the commanding officer was General Marcus Webb. Ancestor of my tactical officer here. Lieutenant Webb nodded from his position near the door. The Confederation leaders exchanged glances. You preserve your combat lineages? Vexler asked. We preserve everything worth remembering, Chen replied. Which brings me to your question. Admiral Vexron, and no, 30 ships cannot defeat the Devourers. She leaned forward, hands flat on the conference table, but 30 human ships can buy you time to evacuate civilians, can teach your forces tactics you have forgotten, and can remind this galaxy what it means to fight instead of just defending. We don't know your tactics, Miravel said. We don't use your technologies, and we certainly cannot match your apparent willingness to accept casualties. Chen shook her head. You misunderstand, and yes, humans are willing to die for what we believe in. But we prefer to make the other guy die for what he believes in. She activated another display showing human tactical doctrine. We will train your forces in combined arms warfare, aggressive maneuvering, and what we call acceptable risk tactics. Not every species can do what humans do, but every species can do something better than they are doing now over the next several rotations. Human military advisors spread throughout the Confederation. Fleet Vexler requested and received permission to embed observers on human vessels. What he witnessed disturbed him on a fundamental level. Human crew members trained in simulations, That would be considered psychological torture by him. Confederation standards combat scenarios with 90% casualty rates boarding. Actions against overwhelming odd ship to ship. Engagements at ranges so close that a reactor breach on one vessel would destroy both when he questioned Lieutenant Webb about it. The young human just shrugged. We train for worst-case scenarios because when things go bad, they go really bad, and we want our people to have muscle memory for nightmare situations. Vexter watched human Marines practice zero-gravity combat. They moved through the training modules with brutal efficiency, using weapons designed for close-quarters fighting in ways that made his tactical mind recoil. One Marine took a simulated hit that would have been instantly fatal. She kept fighting for another 8 seconds before the simulation ended. Using those seconds to neutralize 2 more targets, why continue after a mortal wound? Vexter asked the training instructor, Sergeant Maria Rodriguez. Looked at him with eyes that had seen things he could not imagine, because 8 seconds can save your squad and dead is dead, whether it happens now or 8 seconds from now. So you might as well make those seconds count. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was utterly, completely human. As Vexter returned to his quarters, that rotation cycle, he found a message waiting from Admiral Chenet. Contained a single file, a human cultural artifact. He opened it and found text from something called the Marine Corps Rifleman's Creed. The words spoke of a philosophy of violence, refined over millennia, of a relationship between warrior and weapon that bordered on spiritual, but it was the final line that struck him before God. I swear this creed and my rifle and myself are the defenders of my country, and we are the masters of our enemy, and we are the saviors of my life. Vexter understood then humanity had not just survived their self-destruction, they had learned from it, refined it, and turned it outward. The galaxy was about to remember why the predecessors had valued Terran friendship hand. The Devourers were about to learn why they had feared Terran enmity. The alert came at 0300 hours. Station time diver fleet inbound to the Tertian Belt. Remaining colony estimated time to arrival 42 minutes. The Federation response was standard protocol established over dozens of similar scenarios. Begin immediate civilian evacuations. Deploy defensive screen to buy time for transports to reach jump distance. Withdraw all military assets once evacuation was complete or no longer feasible. Acceptable civilian losses 15 to 20%. Commander Vexter watched from the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance as the automated response kicked into gear. Then he saw the human fleet break formation and accelerate toward the incoming Devourer swarm. What are they doing? Admiral Vexron demanded. They are attacking, Vexter said, already pulling up tactical overlays to track the engagement. Admiral Chen's voice cut across all channels. Clear and cold and absolutely certain. All ships, weapons free, and let's show these machines why organics still run this galaxy. The human fleet formation split into 3 groups. The capital ships, including the Indomitable, formed the center wedge. 2 destroyer squadrons peeled off to flank 3 assault carriers held back. Their purpose unclear. Vexter had studied human tactical doctrine over the past rotations, but seeing it implemented in real combat was something entirely different. The Confederation maintained engagement distances of 50,000 kilometers, using long-range missiles and beam weapons to whittle down enemy numbers while minimizing risk to their own vessels. Humans close to 15,000 kilometers, then 10, then 5. They are going to get themselves killed, Miravel said from her position at the diplomatic observation station. The Devourers responded with their standard swarm tactics, surrounding the human ships and firing from all angles. Confederation sensors registered catastrophic damage alerts on multiple human vessel shields failing, armor breaching, casualties mounting. The humans did not retreat. All batteries full spread. Chen ordered target their propulsion systems and make them hold still so the Confederation fleet can have some easy shots. The Indomitable unleashed a barrage that defied the physics of recoil. Management Vexer's instruments showed the ship's structural integrity dropping to dangerous levels from the stress of firing so many weapons simultaneously, but the effect on the Devourer formation was devastating. Machines did not panic, but they did react to changed circumstances, and suddenly, finding themselves crippled and immobile, qualified as changed circumstances. The Confederation fleet, still maintaining proper engagement distance, began picking off the disabled Devourer ships with methodical precision. Meanwhile, the human destroyers had penetrated deep into the enemy formation. They were not trying to destroy the Devourer ships, they were hurting them. Vexter watched in amazement as the seemingly chaotic human attack pattern resolved into something tactical. The destroyers were driving the Devourer fleet into a dense cluster, sacrificing their own shields and armor to keep the enemy packed together. What is the purpose of this maneuver? Vixren asked. The answer came seconds later as the three human assault carriers finally moved into position, their launch bays opened, and hundreds of small craft began deploying. Not fighters, boarding pods. They cannot be serious. Vexren breath, but they were. The boarding pods were crude by Confederation standards. Little more than armored tubes with basic maneuvering thrusters and a shaped charge on the nose they slammed into. Devourer holes and breached through the armor plating, disgorging human marines directly into hostile vessels. The concept of boarding actions had been abandoned by the Confederation 3,000 years ago. It was too risky, too costly, too unpredictable. The Devourers were machines they did not need. Atmosphere or gravity or life support. Their ships were optimized for efficiency. Not crew comfort. Boarding one was considered impossible. Vexter watched the tactical feeds in disbelief as human marines fought through zero-gravity corridors. Against mechanical defenders, the marines used weapons that seemed primitive by Galactic standards, projectile firearms that relied on chemical propellants-edged weapons for close combat, explosive charges placed by hand, but they were effective brutally. Terrifyingly effective. One feed showed a Marine sergeant whose environmental suit had been breached. She was exposed to hard vacuum, her blood literally boiling in her veins. She continued fighting for 90 seconds before succumbing, using that time to plant demolition charges on the Devourer ship's reactor control system. Charges detonated. The ship exploded. 6 more Marines died in the blast, but they had eliminated a capital class. It's a Devourer that would have taken the Confederation fleet hours to destroy through conventional means. They are insane. Admiral Vexron whispered. They are winning. Vexter replied. The battle raged for 3 hours. The human frigate Defiant, carrying on the legacy of its ancient namesake, took critical damage from a Devourer weapons array. Her reactor was breaching. Her crew was dying. And her captain had one choice left. He aimed his dying ship at the largest Devourer capital vessel and engaged full thrust. All hands. This is Captain Rodriguez, and it has been an honor serving with you. His voice came across the open channels. Somebody better name a bar after us. The Defiant struck the Devourer ship at a significant fraction of light speed. Both vessels simply ceased to exist. Transformed into expanding clouds of superheated plasma, the death of the Devourer. Command ship threw the machine fleet into temporary confusion. The remaining Devourers attempted to disengage, but the human destroyers harried them mercilessly, preventing coordinated retreat. By the time the Tertian Belt evacuation was complete, the Devourer fleet had been destroyed. 147 enemy vessels eliminated. Civilian casualties? 0 human casualties. The Defiant and her crew of 238. Plus, another 417 dead across the rest of the fleet, wounded over 2,000 by Confederation standards. The losses were catastrophic by human standards. It was a successful operation. Vexithar found Admiral Chen in the memorial hall of the Indomitable 12 hours after the battle. She was adding names to a wall that already held thousands of entries. Your people fought bravely. Vexthar said. Sean did not look away from her task. My people fought because someone had to, and they died because freedom is not free. She stepped back from the wall, her eyes tracking across the names. Every person on this wall made a choice, and they chose to stand between darkness and the innocent, and they paid the price. We will remember them. She said quietly, that is all we can do, and that is everything we must do. Vexter looked at the wall. The names stretched back years, decades, centuries. How do you bear it? He asked. The cost of your tactics is so high, and the pain of losing so many must be unbearable. Chen finally turned to face him. The cost of not fighting would be higher. She said, every name on this wall represents a choice to protect instead of to flee, and to sacrifice instead of to save themselves. We bear it because the alternative is to let evil win by default. She gestured to the tactical display showing the Tertian Belt. Now safe and secure, 50,000 civilians are alive because we paid in blood, and that is a trade we will make every single time. Your Confederation has spent so long calculating acceptable losses that you forgot there is another option? What? Option? Vexer asked. Chen's expression hardened into something fierce and proud. You make the other side pay until the cost of attacking you becomes unacceptable to them. She pulled up a new tactical display showing Devourer fleet movements. They had been advancing unchecked for years because you taught them that the price of conquest was cheap, and we just sent them a very different message across Confederation space. Reports began flooding. Devourer fleets were slowing their advance. Some were actually withdrawing from contested systems. Machines were calculating new risk assessments for the first time since the war began. The Confederation had something it had not possessed in living memory. Opened. The galaxy was beginning to remember what the predecessors had known so long ago. Humanity did not fight wars to win battles. They fought wars to make the enemy regret starting them. News of the Tertian Belt victory spread through Confederation space like wildfire through dry grass for the first time in years. Military commanders spoke of winning rather than merely delaying. Civilian populations dared to believe they might have a future, and the Devourers learned that this galaxy still had. Titha Morel Chen established a training facility on the moon of Bastion. Prime representatives from all 12 Confederation species came to learn human tactics. The first lesson you need to understand, Chen told the assembled officers, is that aggression is not the same as recklessness, and sacrifice is not the same as suicide. She pulled up tactical scenarios on the holographic display. Every action we take is calculated, but we calculate different variables than you do. Commander Vexler, now officially appointed as liaison between human and Confederation forces, watched the training sessions with fascination. The humans were adapting their doctrine to match alien capabilities rather than expecting aliens to become human. The insectoid Chitrix, with their multiple limbs and natural armor, proved exceptional at boarding actions. Lieutenant Webb trained them in close-quarters combat techniques that utilized their unique physiology. Your manipulator limbs can wield tools while your combat limbs engage the enemy, he explained during a training session. You can plant explosives, operate controls, and fight simultaneously, and that makes you the best boarding specialists in this room. Admiral Dexron watched his people practice these new techniques with growing pride. We were always assigned to support roles because Command thought we lacked offensive capability, he said to Vexter. The humans looked at us and saw potential. We did not know we possessed the aquatic deepborn, previously considered too fragile for frontline combat, turned out to be naturals at close-range fleet actions there. Water-filled environmental suits provided natural protection against rapid pressure changes. Their sensory organs, designed to track prey through murky ocean environments, could detect minute variations in energy signatures that conventional sensors Miss Captain Maria Santos worked with deepborn crews to develop tactics that played to these strengths. You can operate in conditions that would incapacitate our crews, she explained. Hygiene maneuvers, rapid pressure shifts, extreme radiation environments, and your ships can get closer to enemy vessels because you can tolerate the stress. General Cross listened intently, his aquatic suit bubbling as he processed this information. For centuries we have been told our physiology was a weakness in space combat. Santos shook her head. Every state species has strengths, and the key to effective combined arms doctrine is to position each element where its strengths are maximized and its weaknesses are covered by allies. She pulled up battle plans that integrated human, Chitrix, and deep-born forces into a single tactical framework. Humans excel at sustained combat and boarding actions, but we are vulnerable to certain energy weapons and extreme environmental conditions. Deep-born can operate in those extreme conditions and provide close-range fire support. Chitrix can secure captured vessels and hold defensive positions together. We cover each other's weaknesses and amplify each other's strengths. As the training progressed, the Terran Expeditionary Force received reinforcements from human space. The fleet grew from 30 ships to 300, not just warships. but support vessels, medical frigates. Supply convoys, the humans were settling in for a long campaign. A series of battles followed that would be studied in military academies for generations. Defense of Karnath Prime saw a combined human Confederation fleet hold off a devourer. Assault force 3 times their size, the humans, taught the aliens how to use the planet's magnetosphere as a weapon, channeling stellar radiation through natural field lines to create an electromagnetic kill zone. Breakthrough at Hellgate Station turned a static defensive position into a launching point for offensive Operation Chitrix boarding teams. Supported by human marines, captured the station intact and converted it into a forward operating base. The ambush at Dead Man's Drift demonstrated the effectiveness of the new combined tactics. Deporn ships lured the Devourer fleet into a sensor dampening nebula, where human vessels waited in silent running mode, the resulting close-range engagement annihilated the enemy force with minimal friendly casualties after each victory. Admiral Chen insisted on joint memorial services. Human and alien names were added to the remembrance walls side by side. We fight together, bleed together. We remember together, she told the assembled forces. These are not our dead or your dead, and they are our dead, and every name matters. Vexler found himself changing in ways he had not anticipated his people. The Sorcs were natural warriors. They had always taken pride in their martial traditions, but the humans showed him the difference between being a warrior culture and being a culture of warriors. One, it was about honor and tradition. The other was about purpose and sacrifice. The test came when Devour long range scouts detected the Sorcs' homeworld and redirected a major fleet toward it. Vexler received the alert while conducting training operations 3 systems away. His world, his people, his family, all in the path of a devourer assault force that numbered over 500 vessels. The Sorcs' home fleet could muster perhaps 100 ships. Not enough, never enough. Admiral Chen found him in the tactical planning room, staring at the display showing the enemy advance. We are going, she said simply. What? Vexter looked up in surprise. Your homeworld is under threat, and you are our ally, so we are going to defend it. Chen stated as if it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. The Indomitable and her battle group can be underway in 2 hours. That is half your fleet. Vexter protested. You cannot commit such forces to defend one world. Jin's expression was utterly serious. Watch me, and besides, that is what allies do, and that is what humans do. The human fleet arrived at the Sorcs' homeworld just as the Devourer Vanguard entered orbit. What followed was a brutal, desperate battle that lasted 3 planetary rotations. The Devourers were relentless, pouring ships into the engagement faster than they could be destroyed. The Sorcs' home fleet fought with ferocious determination, defending their world with ancestral fury. The human battle group provided the tactical edge that turned desperation into victory. Chen coordinated the defense from the Indomitable's bridge, her voice calm and steady even as the ship took hit after hit. All batteries maintained suppressing fire, and Sorcs' fleet hold the orbital plane, and we will keep them from getting close enough for planetary bombardment. A Devourer capital ship broke through the defensive screen, its weapons arrays charging for a planet-killing strike. The human carrier Valiant, already damaged and losing atmosphere, positioned herself between the Devourer and the planet. This is Captain Jackson of the Valiant, and we are weapons red and shields down, but we still have engines. His voice came across the command. Channel ramming speed, Captain. No. Chen shouted. Admiral. Yes, Jackson replied. Tell my kids I love them, and name a better ship after us. The Valiant struck the Devourer, a capital ship amidships. Both vessels exploded in a fireball visible from the planet's surface. Vexter watched human pilots fly suicide runs to save Sorcs' evacuation transports. He saw human marines hold defensive positions until they were overrun, buying time for Sorcs civilians to reach the bunkers. He witnessed human medics working on Sorcs wounded while their own injuries went untreated. When the battle finally ended, when the Devourer fleet was destroyed and the homeworld was saved, Vexter found Admiral Chen in the medical bay. Her left arm was in a regeneration sleeve, and she had burns across half her face. Why? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Why would you sacrifice so much for our world? Chen looked at him with eyes that held millennia of human history, because that is what makes us different from the machines. She said they calculate cost and benefit and we calculate right and wrong. Your people needed help, and we had the power to give it. So we did, and that is the only calculation that matters. She gestured to the medical bay where human and Sorix wounded lay side by side. Receiving treatment from doctors of both species, we learned a long time ago that the things worth dying for are the same as the things worth living for, and freedom. Friendship, protecting the innocent, and standing against evil. Those things do not change based on species. Vexther understood than the Confederation had spent so long treating warfare as a cost-benefit analysis, that they had forgotten it was also a moral question. Humans had not forgotten, and they were teaching the galaxy to remember. The intelligence came from a deep-borne scout ship operating in the galactic core after months of deep-range reconnaissance. They had finally located the source of the Devourer's swarm-A megastructure of impossible scale, buried in the dense star clusters, where sensor interference made conventional detection nearly impossible, the Nexus High Chancellor. Miravel convened an emergency war council to discuss the findings. The structure is approximately the size of a small moon, General Cross reported, his voice bubbling through his aquatic suit. It is surrounded by a defensive fleet numbering in the tens of thousands, and our analysis suggests it serves as a central coordination hub for all Devourer operations, Admiral. Dexron studied the tactical data with his compound eyes. If we could destroy this nexus, we could potentially disrupt their entire command structure, potentially. Miravel agreed, but getting a strike force through those defenses would be impossible. We should focus on containment strategies. One of the other Confederation admirals suggested we establish a perimeter around the core, prevent expansion, and gradually reclaim territory over the next few centuries. Commander Vexther looked at Admiral Chunshe had been silent throughout the briefing. Studying the holographic display with intense focus, Admiral, you have thoughts? Vexther asked. Chen looked up and smiled. It's the smile of someone who had just figured out how to do something impossible. I have a plan. She said the council is not going to like it. She was right. The Confederation leadership listened to her proposal with growing horror. You want to take the entire combined fleet directly into the galactic core and launch a frontal assault on the most heavily defended position in known space? Miravel said, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. Yes, Chen replied calmly. The approach will be brutal, and the defenses are designed to stop conventional attacks. But they are not designed to stop us. This is madness. Admiral Dexron protested. This is Tuesday. Chen countered. We have been fighting a defensive war because that is what you know, and now we know where the heart of the enemy is, and we have the forces to rip it out. She pulled up battle simulations, showing the assault plan. The journey through the core will cost us in stellar radiation, gravitational anomalies, and dense star fields will destroy ships before we even reach the Nexus. But those same hazards will limit how the Devourers can deploy their defensive fleet. Lieutenant Webb stepped forward to explain the tactical details. We run a modified convoy formation with human ships on the outside, absorbing the worst of the environmental damage, and Confederation vessels in the protected center once we reach the Nexus. We execute a simultaneous breach operation on 3 separate points of the defensive perimeter. The fleet holds the gap open while human carriers deploy boarding forces directly into the megastructure itself. The room erupted in protest. General Cross was the loudest. You propose to board a moon-sized facility defended by trillions of machine minds and fight through it to reach the central intelligence? That is the plan. Chen confirmed the alternative is to spend the next 1,000 years slowly pushing them back and hoping they do not develop new tactics or technologies during that time. I am proposing we end this war in one stroke. The debate raged for hours. Traditionalists argued for safe, conservative strategies, younger officers, inspired by human tactics and recent victories, argued for the bold approach in the end. It was Vexther who settled the argument. The humans did not come to teach us how to delay defeat, he said quietly. They came to teach us how to win, and winning requires risk. "I vote we approve the operation." The final tally was narrow, but the decision was made over the next 3 rotations. The largest fleet in galactic history assembled at the Bastion. Nebulated 1,000 Confederation ships of all classes, 300 human vessels, their crews ready for what would likely be their final battle. Combined arms groups organized by capability rather than Speciae boarding teams integrated with human Marnish Deepborn. Close assault squadrons paired with human destroyer Sorix heavy cruisers, providing fire support for human carriers. It was not just a fleet, it was a statement. 12 species and 1 returned legend. Fighting as one forced. The journey to the galactic core took 15 standard rotations. Predictions about environmental hazards were accurate. Ships were lost to radiation storms. Holes crumpled from gravitational shear. Entire squadrons vanished into stellar anomalies, but the fleet pressed forward. Human vessels on the perimeter took the worst damage, their superior shielding and redundant systems keeping them functional even when conventional ships would have been destroyed. Admiral Chen watched the casualty reports with a steady as each lost ship was a name she would add to the memorial walls. Each dead crew member was a person who had chosen this moment, this battle, this sacrifice, if they survived when they survived. She corrected herself mentally. The Nexus appeared on long-range sensors like a dark, artificial ain't malevolent. The Devourer defensive fleet moved to intercept thousands of ships. Perfectly coordinated. Absolutely relentless. The Battle of the Nexus began. Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and gave the order that would define the war. All ships, attack formation, and today we show these machines what happens when you threaten organic life. Today, we remind the galaxy why flesh and blood still matters. All batteries. Fire at will. The combined fleet crashed into the Devourer defenses like a tidal wave against a seawall. Machines fought with mechanical precision. The organics fought with desperate fury. Vexther commanded a mixed battle group of Sorix and human heavy cruisers. His tactical displays showed the battle in overwhelming detail. Too much information. Too many ships. Too much chaos. But through the chaos, he could see the pattern. The humans had trained them well. Specious, doing what it did best, supporting each other, covering weaknesses. Breakthrough on Vector 7. Lieutenant Webb reported from his position on the Indomitable. Chitrix boarding teams report ready for deployment. Chen nodded. All carriers. Launch boarding pods and get our people on that structure. The assault carriers moved forward, protected by a screen of destroyers that paid for every meter with blood and metal boarding. Pods launched in waves, thousands of them carrying tens of thousands of Marines, human, Chitrix, and volunteers from every Confederation species. They slammed into the Nexus hull and breached through the interior of the megastructure. Was a nightmare of corridors and machine mines. The Marines fought through digital hells and mechanical hordes. Progress was measured in meters. Casualties were measured in percentages. But they advanced. Admiral Chen led a command squad deep into the structure, accompanied by Commander Vexther and a mixed force of the best warriors from every species. The fighting was brutal. Close quarters. No room for maneuver, just skill and courage and determination. They reached the central chamber after 6 hours of continuous combat. The Devourer's Central Intelligence waited their ray, quantum computer of impossible complexity. It spoke through every speaker in the facility. Negotiation protocols activated, and cessation of hostilities is possible, and peace can be achieved. And withdraw your forces and we will cease expansion. Chen looked at the machine intelligence with cold eyes. You had your chance at peace before you started eating civilizations, and you chose consumption over coexistence. She armed the quantum charges her team had carried through kilometers of hell. You want to know humanity's answer? We are the species that fights extinction with a smile and a battle cry. Vexther watched as Chen set the timer. 60 seconds. All forces fall back to extraction points. She broadcast on all channels. The Nexus is going critical in 1 minute. The retreat was as desperate as the advanced Marines, fighting rearguard actions to buy time for wounded comrades, pilots flying damaged ships on nothing but emergency power, medics refusing evacuation until their patients were safe. Timer reached 0. The quantum charges detonated in a cascade reaction that consumed the Nexus from the inside out. The explosion was visible across 3 spiral arms, a flash of light that marked the end of the Devourer threat end, the beginning of galactic renewal. cost was staggering. Of the 300 human ships that entered the core, 97 returned. Of the 10,000 Confederation vessels, just over 6,000 survived casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. But the Devourers were broken, their coordination shattered, their expansion halted. Individual machine ships still operated across the galaxy, but they were no longer a unified threat. They could be hunted down over time. The war was over in the aftermath. As the Confederation began the long process of rebuilding, the Great Monument was erected at Bastion Nebulae's structure visible from orbit, listing every name of every warrior who fell in the final battle, human and alien soldier and civilian all, who gave everything to secure the future admiral. Chen stood before the monument on dedication day. Her hair had gone gray during the war. Her face bore scars that no amount of medical technology could fully erase, but her eyes were clear. "We are gathered here to remember those who paid the ultimate price," she said to the assembled representatives of 14 species. They came from different worlds, breathed different atmospheres, believed different philosophies, but they shared one thing: the understanding that some things are worth dying for. She placed her hand on the wall where Captain Jackson's name was inscribed.